We're good to go. Go.
Okay. So, hey guys, this is Shakul and core team member of iSTEM. So, we have brought another webinar, continuing our webinar series. So, today we will have 3 different colleges from different part of India, and they will talk about the inclusive education in their different campuses, what all they have done to make their campus more accessible, and so on and so forth. So we have Ashoka University from Delhi NCR, we have IIM Bangalore, and we have St. Xavier's College from Mumbai. So we'll all have different presentations from different colleges, and so Ashoka University will be starting first. So they will be using a PowerPoint presentation, and for all sighted audience can see once they start the presentation. For visually impaired audience, we have uploaded the presentation on our website, so you can go on inclusive STEM, that is INCLU SIVESTEM.org/webinar, that is WEBINAR6-1.pptx. I repeat, inclusivestem.org/webinar6-1.pptx. So you can download the presentation from there, and you can go through while they are presenting. So we are going to start with Ashoka University. So we have Reena Gupta and Aditya Sen from Ashoka University. So Reena Gupta is the director of Office of Learning Support, the office which deals with all kind of special need problem with different students. And we have Aditya Sen, who is deputy program manager. So Reena Gupta has finished her master's from University of California in clinical psychology with a certification in education therapy, and right now she is working with Ashoka as a director of OLS. And before that she also founded an organization called MindZera, and she's a director of MindZera as well. And about Aditya Sen before joining Ashoka University was working at EY as a consultant, and he graduated from Bangalore. And later on, after working 3 years in EY, he realized that consulting is not for him, and he, then paradigm shift, and he came and joined the academia. He's doing a good job over there. So Reena and Aditya will take you through about Office of Learning Support and what it does at Ashoka, how we started, what all we have done, and what about our future goal and ambitions. So over to Reena and Aditya.
Thank you, Shakul. Reena would start this.
Yes.
Can you please share your screen, Reena?
Is it visible?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Karthik, Shakul, for giving us this opportunity to be here today and talk about Ashoka University, and of course the Office of Learning Support at Ashoka. If you can you see the slides?
Yes,
we can see that.
Yeah, okay. All right. So to start with, I think I'll just talk a little bit about Ashoka University. It's about, it's about 4 years old, very, very new. And this is mainly for students who have interest in liberal arts degree program, basically in literature, philosophy, psychology, mathematics, economics, and all social and physical sciences. The ethos of Ashoka is basically on helping students become well-rounded individuals. To have them look at things from different perspectives, think critically, and gain confidence. To take on the complex world. So the programs have been designed in a way which gives the students experience, hands-on experience. In the real world challenges. So this is a 3 years degree program with a choice of additional 4th year. so that, you know, if anybody and any student is interested to go abroad, they can get this 4 years of graduation plus 3 years of graduation plus 1 year of extra 1 year. The professors are from all over the world who come to teach here, maybe for a full year or maybe for 1 semester. And Ashoka has the students who come here are very diverse, you know, in terms of they come from all walks of life. And the most important thing is that, you know, more than 50% of students are on funding. So they are funded for their education here. And to support everybody, we have various offices and centers catering to special needs, social emotional needs, specifically English language needs and mathematical needs. Taking forward from Ashoka, yes, now I'm going to talk about how Office of Learning Support was started. The discussion about this was started about, I must say, maybe in beginning of 2015, when the idea was discussed in a very informal way in some conference happening in Delhi. And we thought about that, you know, if Ashoka cannot do it in Northern India, then, you know, who else will do? Because this is the place where they're talking about liberal arts and thinking critically and making the new generation students go up there. So various discussions happened. There were lots of meetings that we had with the management. Yes, there were hiccups, to get everybody on the same page in terms of disability support. Did take some time, because you had to buy in the faculty there, you had to buy in the staff members. So it did take some time. But we had a very, very strong backing from the Dean of Academic Affairs at that time. And it took us almost 1 year to actually get it started. And then in 2016, finally we had a formal Office of Learning Support. And we had our own room, and then we hired people. Before Aditya, we had another person. So that is how the whole office was started. Now the objective of inclusion for Office of Learning Support is, of course, to widen the student base, because the admissions team had the admissions team at Ashoka did mention that, you know, there are many students who do inquire about the support system available at Ashoka, if any. And while they could talk about, yes, that there is support, but they could not go into the depth of it, because our office was extremely new and we were not fully equipped. So of course we could not take everybody, you know, who had applied. Secondly, of course, it was a social responsibility. And yes, the Ashoka already had some students, who had, I would say, invisible disabilities. So like dyslexia and dysgraphia, learning disabilities basically, or ADHDs. And that is why we started with we actually defined our scope, and we put learning disabilities as the first step for us, the first area of support system. Because I myself, I'm more trained, I have experience in learning disabilities, specifically dyslexia. So we thought that, you know, we will start with something which is relatively easier to manage, so that, you know, once we have our systems in place, once we have our support plan in place, slowly we are going to go into supporting the physical disabilities, and then take it further to other disabilities such as autism or other ones, or any other cognitive disability. Preparing for inclusion, we started with the holding workshops and training sessions for the faculty, just to get to their knowledge that, you know, catering to everybody's need is going to be the culture for Ashoka University. And once we started talking about it, we started framing our policies and getting in touch with other people, other organizations around to get the best practices available. So that, of course, all of this was mainly done in an informal way, because we were so new into all this that we did not have, first of all, enough students to be able to create a very robust kind of a policy. So based on our experience, we are still learning. We are still a little informal in that sense. We are still working on the policy. We are still working on building the culture. We are still getting the best practices from around the world. So where have we reached? What are we doing now in 2 years? When we started from 2016, at that time we had to coin a name for our office, and at that time we were very careful because we were catering to more of invisible disabilities at that time. We wanted to give it a name, a more neutral name. So that's why we thought of Office of Learning Support, so that this office is seen as a support office, not only for somebody who faces learning challenges, but for anybody who has any other kind of difficulty also. It may not have to stem from any disability. It can be a very temporary issue that they might be facing. So we wanted students to come and get the academic guidance from us for any kind of an academic difficulty. We have supported several students. In fact, some of them have graduated now. Like I mentioned, we have shifted gears, and now we do act as case managers for some students, where we, like I said, they may not have a disability, but we do work with them on their planning, on their organization skills, and we get in touch with their professors and get the system work for them. We have organized various talks and guest sessions in last 2 years, and it has been received very, very well. We are still in the process, very, very new. We have lots of things to learn from others. What all do? We do informal and formal assessments. So I myself, I'm trained in psychoeducational assessments, which I do outside Ashoka also, as the founder, director of Mindstella Learning Solutions. So we students at Ashoka who are not formally assessed, who do not have a document stating that they have a disability, especially learning disability, I can conduct those assessments with them. And if anybody has a formal document with them, then I do kind of a needs assessment with them. So just to understand how exactly they can be helped on the campus. So then we prepare a list of interventions and accommodations. We share them with the professors, with the faculty, with the different centers they're going to work with. We basically become their case managers. And we do offer one-on-one remedial instruction also, mainly for reading and writing. We see Office of Learning Support engaging with the students through all these phases, the outreach, the admissions, the first year and beyond, second year and beyond, employability. We do see Office of Learning Support helping the students through these phases, but at present we are mainly working with them at first year, second year and beyond level. Admissions, we have just started working with the admissions team so that we can engage with the students with disability at the admission time also, but that's not completely formal. Outreach team, we haven't started working with the outreach team as yet, but that's on our agenda for this year. Employability, connecting with the industry, is another area that we have to start looking at, because students with disabilities, when they graduate from Ashoka, it is important for them to get inducted in the industry outside, and we would like to get in touch with the industry people there, so that if they need any support, if they need to understand how to help, how to make things better, we would like to engage with them too. We do face challenges. The most important and the major challenge that we face is regular interaction with the students. So we face that, the students who are on our list, who have been receiving support, they do disappear. In that sense that, we may keep writing to them, but they may not come and talk to us. But one fine day, suddenly they might show up because they have, for example, they have an exam the next day and they need extra time, they need some accommodations. So at some level, with some students, it becomes more of a reactive support than proactive, both from the students and the office side. In terms of why I'm saying from the office side, because there are some tools that we are still working on procuring. And unless we have a student who is sitting in our office asking and demanding for the help, we may not have it beforehand. So once they are in the office, then we do start looking for the best support that we can give to them in terms of any technological tool. In last 6 months, as an office, we have collected a list of, we have made a repository of a good resource, tool equipment for us. And we have shared this information with the students at Ashoka, but not everybody has come up and is requesting or asking for these resources. So though they are available, not everybody is availing it, basically. And our biggest challenge this year has been to get more students with disability to apply to Ashoka. We did get in touch with the various organizations in India, but unfortunately, we didn't get any applications. So that's, we did, I think one visually impaired student did apply. He got through also. He was offered the admission, but he did not take that offer. So he's gone somewhere else in Delhi University, I guess. So this is one of our another important aspect that we have to work on going forward, to spread the word, to let people know that, if they are interested in liberal arts education, there is support available for them. Talking about the number of students with different kinds of disabilities, this is just for you to know that we are, in this last 1 year, we have worked with 8 students with learning disabilities like dyslexia and all, ADHDs and all, 1 visual impairment, 1 hearing impairment, 1 we suspect that has an autism but does not have a report stating that. You will see many students, like I mentioned, they come to us who do not have as such a learning problem or a diagnosed learning problem, but they go through some phases which make their academics worse for them. Though at Ashoka we do have a Center for Well-being, which is completely dedicated to mental health concerns. But when it comes to academic support, some of them do come to us and we support them at our level. Going forward, like I mentioned, it's on our agenda that we have to collaborate with our outreach team better, and we also have to get the word out, in the media, so that people know that there is a university which supports students with disabilities in this area, in Delhi NCR area at least. Next is to develop a resource hub and the accessibility, which Aditya is going to talk about in detail. Aditya?
Right, Reena. If you can just change the slide for me, I can take them through.
Sorry, what do I have to do?
Just change the slide for me.
Okay, all right.
So here in Ashoka, we started collecting resources and trying to identify the resources available with us and also available around us, where we figured out that a lot of universities inside Delhi are working on some amazing technology and Shakul being with us helped us understand use of this technology and how Ashoka should have it and how we can leverage them to make our support structure very strong. So currently we have conversion of LaTeX which Shakul uses himself. We are also converting audiobooks here inside the campus if we request it to us. We are also looking at DAISY and EPUB conversion starting now, because after my meeting with Neha and talking to people at the DAISY forum, I have understood how this kind of formats are going to really help students not only with disability, but also people who are print impaired. This also includes students with learning disabilities like dyslexia. We also have provisions for scribes and audio recording inside the classroom. We earlier used a volunteer group who would do the transcription for us of these audio recordings. The most important support function that we have here in Ashoka is the one-on-one time that we have with our TAs and TFs who are aligned to a particular course and a particular professor. So in case the student is unable to understand the subject inside the classroom, this TA and the TF could actually make notes and make the student understand the entire subject outside the classroom. A dedicated hour is fixed between the TF and the students who would then sit together and figure out how to go about the course. We also have in-person time with the professor, just in case the professor is not aware of a certain student on how he or she learns. Um, this is the best time for this professor to interact with the student, understand his needs, and probably guide him through how he would the student would be able to leverage from the course. We are also, as Reena said, working on a software repository and learning modules here at Ashoka, where we are going to create a pool of softwares and have people use them extensively, because this is to us a way forward for including a lot more people into the curriculum of Ashoka. And looking at the curriculum that we follow here in Ashoka, it is very important that we keep on leveraging help, because otherwise it is going to get really expensive. Talking about outsourcing our technology, so just because we cannot have everything in-house, we have started using the nearby universities who are working on the tactile graphs as IIT Delhi works on, which earlier used to be so expensive. And now with the help of them, we can actually get it very easily. Also that they can print books in Braille and notes in Braille if somebody needs that from us. So these are the following resources that we are trying to create in-house and provide it to our students. Um, Going forward, Reena, if you can change the slide, I'll take them to the next slide too. So physical accessibility is something that we are really working on and we are very mindful of, which wasn't there in Ashoka. And Shakul himself has been with us and he has given us a lot of input on how we can really work on and make the campus accessible, and what things should have been in place and what would really help anybody who is coming into Ashoka, their life more independent. So looking at that, we are actually in negotiation with a company to work on the tactile pathway around the campus. We have already spoken to our internal infrastructure team to get the modifications of the ramps that we have in place, and the shuttle service that we have, also a golf cart to give us the campus tour. We have also spoken to them about making those systems accessible for anybody who is coming on campus, especially for a wheelchair bound person or a visually impaired person. So these are still on our agenda. We are seriously working towards them, and probably by the next couple of years, we will have some good physical accessibility in place. Um, Talking about a new plan that we have come up with in discussion with a company, Bangalore-based company called ID. So they are going to help us leverage some more technology and understand how we can make the campus more inclusive through digital mapping. So digital mapping basically is going to help us not only navigate, but also walk and reach the place without any obstruction and difficulty, or even leveraging any other support. Uh, Talking to them, we realized that this would be better for us, because on campus to provide support all the time wouldn't be possible, and the person has to move from one place to another at any given point in time and has to do that independently. So this technology basically would help us navigate from point A to point B, giving us the directions, also telling us about the obstructions on our way, and guiding us around the obstruction to reach the destination. Uh, More on this technology we will be sharing once we have the team coming to us, giving us the details of it, and we have finally executed the entire project. It will be very easy for us to share how this works, and we will be able to give you more updates on the usage of the technology on campus. Going to the software part that we have, as I was speaking about, uh, we also have software for dyslexic student, dysgraphic students, where they are using screen text to speech to text softwares, text to speech softwares. They're also using some visualizing software like Inspiration. Uh, and these softwares are basically available with the office, as Rina earlier mentioned, but people are not really utilizing these softwares that we can actually provide to them. We're also trying to create a more compact and more resourceful software hub where I think the entire university will be able to leverage the support if at all they need at any given point in time without even approaching the office. Uh, but this is going to take some time, as we are not prepared to send out 2,000 copies of the software to everybody on campus at present. Rina, if you can just take us through the last few slides.
Right. So this is just going through the journey in a glimpse for you that, where we started, where we are now, what are our next steps, and where we actually aspire to be. Our original plan was, like I mentioned earlier, that, we would support students with learning disabilities specifically. That's where we started with. Basically ADHDs and dyslexia and other, because it was easier to provide classroom support and exam accommodations to them. I feel very proud. I do feel proud that, in 2 years we have reached, where we are supporting many more disabilities, and to be honest, not being fully trained in supporting visual and hearing impaired students, we have been able to, yes, with some hiccups, with some support from the students themselves, we have been able to now provide some level of support to them, besides supporting the LD and ADD, ADHD students. We have planned out how we are going to work with the outreach and admissions team. We are also supporting students with ESL needs. Though we do have a center at the campus, we have a Center for Writing and Communication, which formally works with these students. But if anybody has any specific need in terms of a disability, even with the ESL students, we do work with them and provide one-on-one remedial. And if they need assessments, yes, then I do the assessments with them. We have now come out with a structured framework. And with the new batch coming in August, we will be able to share a very clear picture with them, the whole, regarding the process of support system at Ashoka. We have reached a level where we have quite a clear idea on, how to make the campus physically accessible. We have been able to procure some good assistive technology tools for academic accessibility. We have framed a policy around the volunteer group, volunteer support. And the most important thing is to develop collaborations. Very, very important for us, because we are at a stage where we are like hungry for new information, hungry to learn from people who have been into this work for last several years. So we do request, in fact, XRCVC, IIM Bangalore, IIT Delhi, Assistic Lab, and all that please share your experiences and help us reach where you are right now. So we look forward to that. Next steps in terms of including disabilities, we are preparing ourselves to welcome students with high functioning autism, Asperger's, and with locomotor disabilities. This is, of course, in addition to what we have been doing till now. And where we aspire to be, we want to be seen as center of excellence. We want to be seen as a role model in terms of providing support to the students with disabilities, especially in the northern India area. And while I say that, I must say that, if we all can come together, if the universities can come together, form a cohort of universities and set an example for the other colleges and universities to show them the way how to make their curriculum, their campuses, their attitudes more inclusive. So that's where I'm going to end. And if there are any questions, comments, discussion, feel free to write to us.
We will take it at the end.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you so much, Reena and Aditya, for letting us know about Office of Learning Support, about Ashoka University, and so on and so forth. We are thankful to you. Now I would like to invite IIM Bangalore. So Professor Rajlakshmi is with us to talk about the excellent student support at IIM Bangalore, and she will take you through about their journey and how they have supported to students with special need and how they have catered the different needs at their campus. We all know the management institute, so many students inspiring for management things and so on. So over to Professor Rajalakshmi.
Ma'am, you need to unmute your mic. We can't hear you.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right. Okay. So, well, thank you, Karthik and Ritu, for inviting us to join this meeting. When Karthik asked me, I thought this would be really a good way to be able to connect with other people and learn a lot. And I think I've already learned a little bit from Ashoka's presentation. So I readily agreed. Khushbu is also there, and she can also add to whatever I might miss out. Khushbu is in charge of the Office of Disability Services. She's the administrative in charge of the office. I don't really have a PPT. Is that okay? I mean, I can I'm just planning to tell you about our journey orally. Is that good? Hopefully. If you do really want something in written, I could always send you some documents later on. So we have been taking students with disabilities from 2006. And as you're aware, we being a government institute, we were taking as per the requirement of the government, which is 3% students. That would be 12 students for us since then. Now, of course, the quota has gone up to 5%, so we are taking 20 students. Earlier, the disabilities was only of 3 kinds, which is visual, hearing, and locomotor. But now, of course, there is learning disabilities and many others. This is the first time we've got 3 students with learning disabilities, therefore. So after having started in 2006, just taking students, it was in 2010, we actually set up a committee for it was called the Committee on Disabilities, and also the Office of Disability Services. And the motivation to do that was because we could see that the students were really struggling. We would give them some help, but it was pretty much ad hoc. And as you would understand, some professors may give it or some may not give it, etc. So that's how the Office of Disability Services was established. We came up with a policy, and the policy then stated that we would remove all barriers to learning for students with disabilities. And the objective of the policy would be to provide equal opportunity for all students and provide the required support that can help them lead a life as independently as possible while they are at the institute. So that's what the policy stated, and then we had action plans. As time went by, we have been able to implement quite a bit. Of course, nothing is perfect, and we still need to do a whole lot more. But let me just take you through a few things that we do as of now. So we can start from CAT being the entrance exam to IIMs. CAT is now fairly accessible. It wasn't earlier, Earlier, it used to provide extra time and wheelchair access, etc., but not much else. Over a period of time, we learned from students that they would need some way of being able to, let's say, bring things that they need, which would be maybe if somebody can't hold a regular pen, they might need a thicker pen, or somebody might need to bring a different kind of a keypad or things like that. So now we have added that to the to CAT. There is a way for a student to write to us. Us would mean whoever is convening the CAT that year, and IMB convened it 2 years back. So with that list, with the request, we will approve it, and then the student can carry that approval to the center that they've been assigned, and they will be allowed to take whatever those things are to the exam, apart from the scribe and apart from the extra time, etc. So once the students, and then the next thing would be the interviews. Interviews are accessible in the sense that we make sure that the venue is accessible to the student. Also, that the faculty do know that there is going to be a student with disability on the interview list, and the faculty are then aware of giving them extra time during the written part, and then during the interview, if there is any assistance required, that would be provided to the student. So the next thing, of course, would be that we send offer letters, and the students would accept them. The moment the students accept offer letters, Khushbu from the office sends them a form. This is much before they would come to the institute. And the form requests essentially asks them what kind of accommodations would they need when they come to the campus. This really helps us, especially for cases for students who might have locomotor disabilities. Let's say a person doesn't have both arms, might need lower shelf space in the hostel room, or a person might need a hostel room with an attached toilet, or a person might need to bring an attendant with them and hence may need special accommodation, which we do provide. So all of those things then can be taken care of. If there are any fitments that they would require in the rooms, etc., that can be taken care of in the interim period. Once they come to the campus, we do a formal assessment, which is done by an agency outside, so that it remains objective for us. This is currently done by Rama from DEOC, and the assessment report is then given to us by Rama, which then states which student needs what accommodations. These accommodations then are passed on to the various offices, which would be, so the hostel office generally gets the instructions ahead of time because of the fact that we get those earlier. But let's say the PGP office to say that somebody needs a special seating in the classroom, or and of course to the faculty. So it could be all offices that may need to be informed, plus the faculty. So the faculty note goes is sent by me because I am currently the chairperson, but let's say by the chairperson of the Committee on Disability, sends the note to the faculty. These notes are fairly detailed. They tell the faculty what the student would need, what accommodations would the student need. The faculty by now are fairly used to it in terms of providing the accommodations. And when I go to the challenges, I can mention a couple of things. Maybe you can help me out in terms of what we are struggling with. But by and large, the faculty are fairly sensitized, and they are willing to. So this could be, let's say, PPTs. It could be they're willing to share PPTs, etc. It could be syncing laptops with the desktops in the class. That would be for visually challenged students. Essentially, they cannot see from far away, but if they can sync the laptop with the desktop, then they will be able to see whatever is projected. We will provide iPads to students with visual disability, because that might help them zoom into the board and also be able to then see what's happening on the board. We provide note takers if somebody wants them. On request, we provide note takers. We are going to start a new thing where we might then, instead of note takers, ask a student in the class to share his or her notes in an organized manner, which means that the ODS would then coordinate that activity. So far, we've not done that. We've actually provided note takers, which would be from our volunteer list. But I think that's turning out to be fairly challenging, and you can help me out, some of you who've done this, so as to what might be a better way to do it. But somebody from the class might be able to share the notes we thought would be helpful. We could also provide tutors on request to students with severe disabilities. Essentially, we can't provide tutors to just everybody, because we do have other students and there is this question of fairness. Though the PGP office, which means our program office, does provide tutors for the general students, anybody and everybody, if they need. So either then we will provide, if let's say the student, is visually, is blind. So then we will provide. But otherwise, there are general tutors as well, which can be provided. Scribes, readers, of course, are available. Extra time is available. Thicker markers, pens in classrooms are used by faculty if required. Permission to use assisted devices in class is part of what we would tell this faculty to allow, and things like that. And of course, for visually challenged students, we would give all material in accessible format, which would essentially mean we digitize all material. And there is a little bit of a challenge there for us for graphs. And I just heard, who is that, who spoke about it? I think Reena spoke about coordinating with IIT Delhi for tactile graphs, and we might then be able to look into that. For hearing impaired students, it would be generally preferred seating in class, PPTs before class, assistance in note-taking, and providing transcript of videos that are used in class. So what we do is we send a note to the faculty telling them that either please use videos which do already have transcripts, but if they don't, send them to us and we will, ahead of time, and we will actually do the transcription for you and send it to you. For locomotor disability students, we provide speech-to-text software. Dragon is what we provide so far. Scribes are, of course, available for everybody, whoever might need them, assistance in note-taking, etc. So those are the kind of accommodations that we provide. All over the campus, of course, we do have rails, ramps, lifts, etc., which have come up over a period of time. By and large, I think the campus is quite accessible now. It's a 100-acre campus, and we thought about tactile markings, but we found it very challenging. So I was very happy to hear about the digital maps that you talked about, I think, Aditya. And I would really like to get that from you, the information on that for you, because we've been thinking about it, but we didn't know where to go. So that's all our classrooms, most of our classrooms are now accessible. And the toilets, etc., all that happens. We also provide, so we help students in whichever way they might need help. So supposing a student really needs an attendant, but it's not possible, then we can provide one. We can provide help with etc. also. If they can't afford it, but they need it absolutely on the campus, then we can do that. So this would be what we provide in terms of the resources. We will provide software, let's say as text-to-speech software or Dragon, etc., if students need them. Let me say a little bit about the challenges that we face. One of the challenges we have faced recently, I would say more recently, is some amount of discomfort from the faculty on a couple of things that we do. One of them is that for a blind student, we would not just give a scribe, but we will also give a student who is familiar with the subject. And this happened because our students did say that for calculations, just any scribe doesn't help. The person has to be familiar with the subject matter. And that's how we started doing that. But recently, some faculty objected to that. And they said, that's not fair. So I would really like to see if you have solutions, any, to help us out with this, if you have ideas on how to solve this problem. The other thing, of course, is learning disabilities new to us. And therefore, I heard Ashoka saying that you are mainly concentrating on learning disabilities, so therefore that would be really helpful. We would really like to talk to you a little bit more about how to do the assessments, etc. Because I would say that the faculty are willing to do things, but on the other hand, Reena, you said that faculty talk to the students to figure out what they need. I think our faculty don't feel that they are capable of doing that. They feel that tell me what to do and I will do it, but very few faculty feel that they can figure it out. So they would rather that we tell them what to do and then they would do it. So I'd like to talk to you about that. So these are a couple of, and of course, things that we need to work on. The future plans for us would be, one would be definitely working on the learning disabilities, and of course, digital maps. That would be two things that we would really like to work on going forward. I did forget to mention that we do a sensitization session, one for staff, one for faculty, and one for students every year. For the students, the purpose is more to reach out to those students who don't have disabilities and help them understand, become comfortable essentially with the idea of disability, with the people with disabilities, and so that no differentiation happens, or no matter what we do, unless there is inclusion in the hostels and classrooms, our job won't be fully done. So therefore, I think those sessions do help, and especially they do help in when we do it for the students. So the general thoughts on what inclusion has done for us, I would say that it of course helps the students with disabilities, and I think by and large students do tell us that they would prefer to come to IIMB as opposed to some other IIM, especially those who have more severe disabilities. They do tend to choose IIMB over others. But I think what really has what is heartening is there is not just the empowerment of the ones who have a disability, but I think in general, I feel that all our students going forward as managers would never hesitate to hire a student with a person with disability. I think they don't see them as any different, from themselves. And partly that also gets tied up because our students with disabilities really don't have any problems getting jobs. Most of them actually get placed very quickly, just 3-4 days, and they get placed. And some of our students are doing very, very well. So we had a student with who was blind, who is now doing a marketing job, which generally you would think a student wouldn't do if you can't see. There is another student who was also blind, who is doing a finance job, and he's doing a wonderful job at that. So given all of that, and our students are aware of all of this, they I think going forward will be very comfortable, hiring people with disabilities. What we are also trying to do is we are trying to, given that we have had recently a few questions from the faculty on, can we do this? Isn't this not fair to others, etc. What we are trying to do is we are trying to benchmark with universities abroad. And the idea is that let's see what universities abroad are doing, maybe 3 universities abroad. And from there, maybe we can then say, okay, this is what is done everywhere. And we, in all fairness, we can do all of this. So that would also then streamline the process completely, where it doesn't become subjective. And year on year, then we are very, very sure of, what can be done. This year, we got 3 students with learning disabilities. So for one of them had a more severe learning disability. The other ones haven't asked us for much help. In fact, one of them said that he does not even want extra time because he does not want to be identified. So we've kind of left it open. We've told him, you can come back to us. But one of the students who does have a larger challenge was finding it quite hard, despite the fact that we did try to give him tutors, etc., to just cope with the workload. So we did think about allowing him to take things slower. And we just actually, day before yesterday, through the faculty council, got a 3-year program approved instead of a 2-year program, which will then allow him to do the same program in 3 years instead of 2. So it's called just a 3-year track. And earlier, this was never sort of thought about. What we did do is if somebody failed, let's say at the end of the first year or second term or third term or whatever, they could they could just go take lesser courses. But that was only after your academic, you cannot make the cutoffs. But in this case, we have proactively now decided that we're going to allow students to do this if the student wants to. So this student will hopefully now benefit, and he's feeling much more, I would say, assured that he will be able to now take the course load. So then I will close it here. Let me know if you have any questions at the end, and then I can answer those. Khushbu, is there anything you would like to add that I missed?
I think
Hello?
you covered all the points, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for giving us this great knowledge about IIM Bangalore. Now we have St. Xavier's College from Mumbai. So we have Neha Trivedi from Xavier's Center, visually challenged. Neha has been working in this space for over a decade, something from 12 years, and she has a lot of experience and she has done a lot in this space. And Center, for that matter, has really done a tremendous job in this field of accessibility, dealing with students with disability. So Neha will also be using the presentation, and for whoever wants to see the presentation, they could again go to inclusivestem.org/webinar6-2.pptx, inclusivestem.org/webinar6-2.pptx, and you can download the presentation from there. Over to you, Neha.
Thanks, Shakul. Hi, everybody. So my name is Neha Trivedi, and Shakul did miss out on telling you all that I'm also part of.
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Neha happens to be our own ISTEM member. How can I forget? I'm so sorry. Yeah, the one and only cited member of ISTEM.
The one and only
Suppose he's the only
cited.
female member.
Yes, the one and only cited and female member, which also brings the whole big issue of gender bias and disability at higher education. Okay, so I'm going to essentially, just a second, let me just try and share the PPT first.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so basically I'm talking in multiple capacities here. Basically, I'm the Student with Disability Coordinator at St. Xavier's College, Bombay. And the department that started in 2003 was called the XRCVC because at that time the focus happened to be the visually challenged. We are of course gone far beyond that now. So I'm the project consultant at the XRCVC, which is a department of St. Xavier's College, but I'll just share the journey with you, which will help you understand better in terms of how the college and the department have worked together at multiple levels, right? So for us, the key points of inclusion in higher education essentially are function at these plug points. So one is the admissions, which are both your policies and processes of admitting students. The other is examinations, infrastructure, campus placements, accessible teaching learning resources, and the culture on campus, right? Having said that, and I was feeling so relieved to hear the numbers at your end, one of our biggest challenges are that our numbers for students with disabilities are extremely high. So across our 5 years of education at St. Xavier's, we on an average have about 100 to 110 students with disabilities, which has essentially demanded us to have systems that have worked on the go, because right from the day we existed, Sam started this actually, just to give you a background. The center started in 2003 when a lot of assistive technologies for students with blindness had started coming in, and there was a need that college should have these technologies, because college always had students but did not have the technology for them because the technology didn't exist before that. So formally we got constituted in 2003, and we've grown organically based on needs of our students. So what I'm sharing with you today is what has matured over the years in the last couple of years. So a lot of this formality did not exist before, and now that it has grown to this point, we felt the need to structure it a lot more. So currently what exists on campus is work at 3 levels. One is at the management level, the other is at the resource center, and the third is at the student community level. So the enabling committee on campus is headed by the principal along with the faculty, resource center staff, and we strongly felt the need to have students with disabilities as representatives on that committee. The enabling committee looks at policy decisions and frameworks for inclusion on campus. We also over the years have felt that because we are a 3,000 plus student campus, the attitudes of students towards their peers make a big difference. And we've struggled a lot with this. We started with sensitization programs. That's how Antarchakshu as an event started by students. And despite doing sensitization workshops and events on a regular basis, we felt that it was very difficult for the students in the end to interact with each other as friends. So a lot of help is available on campus, but to bridge that gap from being a helper to a friend is something that we felt challenging. And most of our students gave us feedback that friendships get formed around events, around coordinating work together. And that's when this idea of creating a student inclusion cell came about. This is actually our first year where we are trying this formally, and we've already got some good feedback and results from the student community, where it is a group of students with and without disabilities that is going to take the onus of creating an inclusive campus and creating culture of inclusion amongst the student community. And the third element is, of course, the resource center, which is the delivery unit for students on campus. One thing that happened to us as a resource center very initially, and which is what decided our trajectory of work, is when we started working with student needs, our students started bringing us questions which were far beyond the campus life. So we were asked questions like, I want a book, you have technology available, but you are going to take 2 months to convert it. I want the book today. So can the law change it? Can you get the book from the publisher? And that's what got us engaged in a lot of advocacy work, which is where the center took off more as an advocacy unit as well. So whilst we do provide services to students on campus, we look at larger advocacy issues, because we feel that when a student comes into Xavier's, we have a bank behind, for example, and they needed to open bank accounts, and our banks refused, because in 2006 when I joined the center, the RBI rule said students with disabilities have to be, especially students with blindness, have to be treated on the same level as people who are illiterate, and they can't open individual bank accounts. And then I was like, okay, if I have a student on campus and everyone has a bank account, why should a student with disability not have a bank account? So that's when we started engaging with the banking community, worked with the RBI to change those laws. So we do a lot of national level advocacy work that looks at access far beyond campus life, because we feel that when students go out, those services should also be accessible. So that's something I'm not focusing on those elements in this presentation today, because that's not the focus, but that's just to give you the context of our work. Okay. So as far as our process is concerned for inclusion, we follow the following process. So when a student comes into college, they would meet me or somebody at the resource center. They would fill an accommodation form that looks at all elements of provisions that they might need. We would, after this form is filled, it would get approved by the enabling committee. I think to answer Professor's question, we tried to do this to counter question the resistance we were getting from the faculty. There were times when we would issue accommodations or requests, with the academic faculty would say, well, you know, this is unfair and we won't allow this and this is not okay. So the enabling committee now, because it has the principal and faculty, they would be part of approving the provision, and as a result, when a formal accommodation letter is given to each student stating what all has been approved for them, and then the student is expected to go and share this letter with the faculty. There was a little debate on whether we should do it or the students should do it, and we chose the latter because we want students to become self-advocates of what their condition is and explaining that to the faculty. So that's how we have chosen the process, where the student goes and shares this letter with the faculty, and the faculty is expected to then provide without questioning. It's not been smooth always, as you would have also experienced, but more or less it's working okay. And then the resource center gets involved in providing the actual services wherever required. We would provide data to the exam control room, and the exam control room will then process it for making all the arrangements for the examination. Because we are an undergraduate institute, our process is 2 middle of the term semester exams and 1 formal NSEM exam. So that process the exam control room takes over. Yeah. In terms of our accommodations that we provide, of course, this is for all across 21 types of disability as per the new law is concerned. Amongst our 110 students on campus currently, we have students with blindness, low vision, orthopedic difficulties, cerebral palsy, high functioning autism, learning disabilities, and the works. Okay, so we have pretty much we have also have students with severe neurological difficulties, with memory concerns and things like that. So the areas for which we provide accommodations are the following. One is, of course, inclusive examinations. The other is note-taking and in-class assistance options. The third is accessible content services. Fourth is teaching learning support. And fifth is the accessible infrastructure service. One of the things that I'd love to take up is in terms of accessibility of CAT, maybe we can talk about later, because one of the challenges that we face with our graduate students trying to prepare for CAT are the visual questions in CAT, which we still have not found a workaround with. So that's something that we could probably take up later. Yeah. So in terms of what each of these entail at St. Xavier's, examinations since last 1 year, we've tried to stretch ourselves in terms of what different modes of examinations could look at, because traditionally we were under the Bombay University. Now we've become autonomous. That allows us to be a little more flexible in terms of what's permitted at examinations, although we are still within the Bombay University guidelines, Government of Maharashtra guidelines, because we are an aided college. But some additional things we can at least provide. So this means that they are permitted use of devices, whatever it be, whether talking calculators, abacus, swell line paper. So to address the question of graphs, our economics students, I mean, I'm happy to share this. Last year was the first year where one of our totally blind students studying economics did his own diagrams for his exams on this paper called the parchment paper that raises up on the same side as he draws. So because he had that service, he felt equipped to do it. This was the first time in an exam some student attempted it, which for us was extremely satisfying. In terms of modes of examinations, we permit writers. We also are encouraging more and more students to become independent in exams. So they are permitted to do computer exams, computer with readers, computers with screen readers, screen magnifiers, all of them are available. So our examination authority makes sure that these facilities are available for the exams. We've also experimented with oral examinations, and this has been for students with high functioning autism. Some students prefer oral over written, some prefer written over oral. So we've had a few students with high functioning autism who are just not performing on written examinations. So for those students, we've attempted full oral examinations and the departments were cooperative so far, so we've been able to succeed with this. We've recently had some conditions where memory is a big challenge. So this is not necessarily autism, but this is neurological disabilities where in assessment, intellect, processing, analysis is all intact, but memory is affected. And the traditional methods of exams, a high element of it is memory. So just this semester, for the first time, we've tried. The earlier oral exams were replication of written, so where memory would still be tested. This time, for the first time, we've had a department engage with a student on a purely conversation basis to test their analytical abilities. So we're saying, can we test your knowledge and analysis and leave memory out of the question and evaluate you with that? We are going to be very keen to see how we can do it for others, because we've started getting cases, I don't know whether it happens on your campuses, with things like MDR, TB, medical conditions where students are on toxic treatments, and that's severely affecting their memory. So this is becoming another concerning trend for us to try and see how we can replicate memory examinations. Yeah. Practical exams, we do provide lab assistance and accessible equipment wherever required. Projects and assignments, there's permission to type them out whenever required. Alternative exams, we do provide large font papers, soft copy papers for students with visual impairment. We also do alternative questions. So where there are visual questions, there will be alternative questions for persons with blindness. And for students with autism, subjective evaluations might get alternated with objective evaluations where the case requires. And for students with learning disabilities, for lengthy answers, because we are a humanities field, and some students with learning disabilities find it challenging to write long answers, they have the permission to write in key points rather than long answers. So they get evaluated for content rather than length of answers. Okay. Infrastructure arrangements, depending on students with locomotor disabilities, they would be made available. In-class assistance, we have been doing permission to record lectures. We've had some resistance by part of teachers for not permitting recording, but then the management sort of their decision based, so students have been permitted to record lectures. Taking assistive technologies to class, having a lab assistant in labs, or having a note-taking volunteer. I would be inquisitive to know how IIM Bangalore does note-taking and tutors. Are they paid or not paid? Our model has been fully volunteer-driven because we just don't have the resources. Our cash resources at higher education are so visible right now that we can't offer any paid support. So our entire system of service delivery to students has been through volunteers. Accessible content again, so we provide e-copies, audio files for students with learning disabilities. We are very clear in not providing audio files to students with blindness because we feel that it affects their learning. They don't learn language, they don't learn spellings, and that is why we don't, as a conscious choice, don't give audio files to students with blindness, but we give that to students with learning disabilities. So e-copies, audio files. We do easy to read content for students with learning disabilities because the volume of material becomes difficult to handle. So we would summarize content in more easily accessible process. Okay. Tactile diagrams for images again. So these, we again do it in multiple levels. The IIT Delhi model is a little more expensive compared to handmade models. So we again, because we have access to volunteers, we convert tactile diagrams through volunteers through using local resources. And we also do thermoforming diagrams whenever required, but that's used for because student needs change. So we try to do handmade diagrams as far as possible. And for hearing impaired students, there is subtitling and transcription of audio visuals available. Teaching learning support, we do provide student volunteers for out of class enforcement and special skill training wherever required. So we do get students, because we are an undergraduate institute again, there might be a student with blindness who comes to us without knowing how to use a computer or without knowing how to use assistive technology devices, then that training is offered. English language support is a huge need because a lot of special schools are in regional languages. So they come into college without language support, so that gets provided. And for students with learning disabilities, if they've missed remediation in school, then we've had cases where some degree of remediation support has to be provided. So we try to do that as far as possible. And accessible infrastructure services, because we are a vertical college, we are a heritage structure, there are things that we just are not permitted to change. So our workaround is to change classrooms for students using wheelchairs, because everywhere we've tried to make it accessible as far as possible, but where it's not possible, we try to do this, which is relocation of classrooms. In terms of what the resource center service delivery involves, as I've said, volunteers who would act as readers, tutors, or mentors, accessible content creation. We do have a college orientation for new students with disabilities who join in, special skill training support. We also do personal and family guidance. This is relevant because we also have junior college, which is 11th and 12th grade. So students coming in to check with us on what careers are possible, what are not possible, what level of independence to permit, not permit. So a lot of guidance support needs to be given. Also assistive technology. So the college, the resource center does have the latest, but a lot of our students who come in might not be aware of everything. So that's something that we do. Recreation is something that we feel strongly about as a resource center, that students with disabilities need to have same opportunities for sports and recreations on campus. So we try to work with that with our sports director, and we do run recreation clubs whenever possible. And advocacy support on need basis. And this has meant sometimes that when our students graduate and they need to appear for higher education examinations and they are not offered services, then we would advocate on their behalf. So that's where in that line we would love to work with CAT to see how we can make, because there have been always issues with scribes, who will be a scribe, what is permitted. So on a need basis, whenever that's required, we worked on those issues as well. Key learnings for us over the years has been student volunteers has really been the key to our success, because the number of students we have with disabilities, there's no way that the resource center will be able to hire staff to manage their needs. So, I mean, as both your institutes also grow to larger numbers of students with disabilities coming in, we really need to look in India to look at how we can use volunteers. Our volunteer system works for us because Xavier's has a very strong culture of insisting that every single Xavierite will not get a degree until they volunteered, say, 45 to 60 hours of time at an organization. So we get a regular flow of about 60 to 80 volunteers every semester from our new batch that joins in. So which is what has made this possible, because external volunteers don't work out in terms of regularity and sincerity. So we have an in-house group of volunteers who we can use. We've always had a thing with having a limited number of quality staff at the resource center. We're expanding the number of staff. So that's another thing that's helped us. Also, in terms of initially, when your numbers of students with disabilities were not that high, and otherwise, we've always kept all our services open to everyone in the city. So we have a system where the resource center works for students with disabilities on campus, but also for everybody else. So we have a membership system of over 500 plus people who would come and use all these services that are available to Xavierites as well. And that sort of helps us keep ourselves sustainable in terms of both funding and also expanding our work. Because initially when we started in 2003, very few colleges in Bombay had resources. So when Xavier's academically will have a cap on how many students it can admit. But if you don't make the academic cutoff, then what happens to the other student who does not have resource? So we've always had an open sharing policy. So whatever is available here is available to everybody outside the city as well. Also, we strongly believe that expertise at higher education can only be built up one step at a time. So I strongly would urge Ashoka and everybody else that don't ever feel that you don't have the expertise. Because as long as you have the intent, you'll build up the expertise. We started with visually impaired and now we're into all the other disabilities. And it's just happened with work. As long as you're connected with your user community, you will build up your resources. So don't ever worry about not having expertise. I don't think any of us had it when we started. And also the other key area is to go to solutions that work on the ground, right? A lot of professionals and a lot of traditional solutions, even in special education, don't work that well at higher education. So, for example, I'll give you an case that happened with us. We had a student with learning disability who came into us at 11th standard science with zero ability to read and write. Literacy levels were absolutely absent, but because there was reservation, he came into our system. Uh, and there was no way. I mean, we approached a lot of people, experts with learning disabilities, and they said there was no way that he was going to bridge the gap of remediation, which has been so big. We are not sure whether he'll succeed in higher education. And for us, it was like he's in our college, we have to try and do the best that we can. So we then took a solution where I hired him 3 to 4 volunteers, one for every subject, and we converted his entire method temporarily into oral. So he would sit with students, learn orally, record orally, and do exams with the writer. So his ability to read and write, even though it was absent, he was able to clear his exams. And now in his 12th grade, he's much more settled than before, because in his summer vacation, I was able to offer him remediation. So I think these are solutions that you might have to look at, which may not fit traditional methods, but they work. So I think as long as you're innovating, it should work, right? So, and the challenges that we've faced is inclusion, and the systems that we've had to set up for inclusion has challenged traditional pedagogy in education. Okay, it has also helped it make it more real. So in the long run, whilst intermittently feathers are ruffled over a period of time, we strongly feel that the inclusion approach has helped college make education better for everybody. So when we've created solutions, like say for example, this thing of oral exams, once it's working for students with disabilities, it's going to work for students with medical needs. So a lot of what you do for inclusion will be applicable to everybody, and that's been really useful. And ultimately, our dream since the time we started, when we were feeling quite lonely and alone, has been that we really hope that all higher education institutes will be able to embrace this. And Xavier's and XRCVC both are willing and happy to share everything that we have to make sure that this just snowballs into something that's present everywhere. And our ultimate desire really is that inclusion won't be an agenda to discuss in education, and it would be the default. So this would be ingrained as part of all our other education systems, where we won't have to necessarily share expertise. It will just become default DNA of all educational institutions. So I think I'll leave it at that for now, and whatever questions are there can be discussed. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that was that was a great ending. Thanks, Neha. Actually, before we go for questions, I wanted to take a minute and talk about like what we at iSTEM basically really wanted to get out of this webinar. And I already kind of see we kind of being successful in being able to do that, which was to connect a lot of these institutions, really help them share whatever they have and learn from each other and figure out like what is it that they can pick up from each other. But as Neha said, I think the goal really is that we don't have these webinars in the future, and then it's pretty much across India, which of course is going to take some time. Something that we have been, for example, thinking at ISTEM is how we could, again, and I keep coming back to this, use technology to make a lot of this more efficient. And so it's actually really interesting to, even for us, to get an understanding of how things really work on the ground, because that provides us a more practical perspective into what is possible using technology, what is not possible using technology, and how we as a group can also potentially help you guys to try and make this process easier for both students, kind of partly from our own experiences as students at these universities in India abroad, but also just kind of like looking at what emerging technologies are coming up and how they could potentially help. So I think it's been a really, really amazing session. Thank you again to all of you for sharing amazing activities that have been ongoing at your universities, and all the amazing work that you've done over the past few years. It's been really, really great to know about that. And now we can open it up to questions. So anyone who has questions can either unmute themselves or type their question in the chat box, and we can take it from there.
Can I go first? Reena here.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, so I have a question to both XRCVC and IIM Bangalore. What kind of specific support do you provide to hearing impaired students in classroom and outside classroom?
So I'm unmuted. So can I go?
Yeah.
Can I?
Sure.
All right. Okay. So for hearing impaired, I did mention it would be, did you say hearing or did you say visual? Hearing, right?
Hearing.
All right. Hearing. So generally, preferred seating in class is one of them, which is easy to do. Some of them do want PPTs before class because that might then not require them to have to hear as much. Assistance in note-taking, providing transcripts, of course, and then lip reading. So most actually of our students who come with hearing impairment, very severe ones, lip read. In fact, I've not yet had a student who did not lip read or needed sign language, because that would be a very, very different challenge for us. Lip reading then, so we do send a note to the faculty saying that this student lip reads, please try to make sure that you don't face away from the student. So these are the various things then. But you're right. I mean, we can do so much more with technology for students with visual impairment, but very little for hearing impairment.
Correct. Thank you so much. Basically, the struggle that we have is we have only one hearing impaired student, and ours being a very discussion oriented curriculum. A professor talks, but there are other students also who get into the discussion. So a lot of to and fro is happening. So that's where this boy does feel a little out of place. He's totally dependent on the notes that the TA or the TF is writing for him. So I was just wondering if there's any technology involved, or if we can work around any technology, if Karthik can figure out something.
Something that a few friends have used at Stanford are the FM system and the CART, which is apparently a real-time captioning system. But even those students have struggled sometimes with those technologies, but they've at least given them some basic access to a lot of the stuff. We at Stanford also do a lot of note-taking. That's definitely one of the most important primary accommodations students with disabilities use on campus as well. Students who are hard of hearing use. So
All
And
right.
then also a lot of I've seen a lot of technologies come up recently that try to again use both speech recognition as well as language understanding models to try and really understand and filter out all of the noise and get even better automated transcriptions. Of course, a lot of that is still in progress, and artificial intelligence is only going to get better with time. But a lot of those solutions are actually already out available, and you could actually pilot them out with students to see how, if at all, they improve their classroom experience.
So I have a request here, Karthik. Just 2 weeks ago, I was visiting King's College London, and this boy I'm talking about was also was doing a summer course there. So they have a system of induction loop.
Oh yes, yeah, I've seen that.
Is,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Is that something that we have in India? Anybody using it?
Yeah, so if I can just come in, induction loops are readily, so basically if you go to any school a special school with children with hearing impairment, they have induction loop systems installed everywhere. So it's one of the older technologies, and it's quite readily available.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just that mainstream classrooms and colleges, we've never installed them because it requires setting up, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but if you contact, I'm sure Delhi NCR also has special schools with hearing impairment. If you go to any of them, that system is readily available.
Okay, all right.
May I ask, what does an induction loop do? I do know what an FM system does, but not sure what an induction loop does.
Yeah, so it's similar in terms of basically, and this primarily depends from student to student, because with hearing impairment, what we found is, depending on the student's hearing condition, they may or may not benefit from the induction loop also. So in some way, I'm bad with technology, but what it essentially, in some ways, it bounces off depending on the issue with hearing impairment, whether it is 1 year or the second year, it would create a loop that will allow you to hear better by creating some surpass. I don't know. Karthik might be able to explain the system.
I am not I'm not
I can
familiar
try
technically.
explaining
Yeah, go for
The
it.
technicality, I don't know, but I've seen it in operation in multiple schools with hearing impairment. That much I know.
Aditya has done his research on this. Aditya, if you can share what you know.
Yeah, so this induction loop basically amplifies the sound. If a
Yeah.
professor is using a microphone inside a classroom to talk, it
Correct.
increases the frequency of the voice that the professor is speaking, and it
Correct.
also reduces the background noise of the classroom,
Yeah.
hence
So
making the voice more clearer.
Yeah. So this would essentially help this would help students who are comfortable with the microphone sounds, because like say we have some students who are quite comfortable with face-to-face hearing, but they will not be comfortable over a phone. So mechanical sound is a problem. So it depends on each situation to situation.
Also, that Neha, to add on to this, that a person who is using the induction loop technology should also use the hearing aid. If this person is
Yes.
not using the hearing aid, it is absolutely useless.
Yes.
Karthik, you also mentioned something called CART. What is that?
I think it's a real-time captioning system. I'm not exactly sure how it works. I just know for a fact that a lot of my friends, and of course, I'm happy to get more details and pass on. But that's also supposed to be some sort of real-time. Neha, do you know about it?
No, I haven't tried it, because
Okay.
our students with hearing impairment primarily are able to, as the ma'am also said, are either able to lip read or are able to listen in close proximity. So with preferred seating and lip reading, they're able to manage in class.
Yeah. Okay.
Videos require transcription, which is what we do then.
Right.
In fact, our students, we have offered them FM systems. They said, no, we don't need that. That only this. I guess it's not comfortable for students.
Right. It really depends. Yeah.
Okay. So to answer your question, I think Neha, you asked that question about other students speaking, because an FM system will then not be able to capture other people speaking, right? So what we do is we would request our faculty to not allow everybody to speak without raising their hands and pointing out to them. So that just gives them, the student with the hearing impairment, just a little bit of time to actually face that side, and then they might be able to hear them better.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a small intervention which might help.
Right. Something and sharing a more of a student perspective here. That raising hands is something that I've always struggled with, especially when you have, for example, guest lecturers come in and guest speakers who don't really know who you are. And also, we've had a lot of classes where you've had like 1,200, 1,300 students. It's just like virtually impossible for teachers to know who you are. I mean, all they really know is, okay, fine, you provided an accommodation letter, and there's this person who has this disability, and that is to it. I've always kind of like found it very, very hard. Something that has been very helpful for me are systems or platforms such as Piazza that, in fact, a lot of the Indian universities are also embracing right now. I know for a fact that IIT Delhi uses a lot of that in their computer science courses, where the idea is that, a lot of the discussion can actually happen online as well. I've had classes where, for example, participation was an integral part of the course, and you would actually get credit. So what I was able to get what I was able to get there was, I'm going to ask follow-up questions on Piazza and share my reflections there, and something that's I think Stanford has been very good with generally is making sure that if I ask for these accommodations, then I'm not kind of singled out. And so what they would encourage professors to do is actually make it a policy for everyone else as well, if that's possible. So a lot of the professors, what they ended up doing was essentially saying, okay, if you want to like ask questions in class, that's fine. Otherwise, you can just ask questions on these online platforms as well, and that would also count towards your participation grade. So that has been kind of very effective. Just sharing an anecdote.
And that is while you are in class, is it?
Yes, while I'm in class, for classes that have participation as a grading component.
So you are in the class, but you can answer the question online.
Well, it's not so much about answering questions. It's more about participation in the sense that asking. Let's say you have some guest speaker come in. It's an entrepreneurship class. You have an entrepreneur come and share his journey. I mean, a lot of these business classes, right? You would know that a lot of the grade is actually based on participation when you're discussing cases and all that kind of stuff, right? So how does it work if you raise your hand, for example? Like some business schools, including ours, sometimes they have like name plaques and like people can actually read off your name and call you out. But then oftentimes you are in classes where you might forget it or you don't have them, and you raise your hand and they say, yes, you, and you have absolutely no clarity who that you really means, and you can end up in some sort of embarrassing situations, right? I mean, it may not sound as big of a deal, but it could be. And so the idea was, hey, what can we do to make that a little better and also fair for students who are blind who might feel uncomfortable with these random yous and not really knowing what to do in those situations. So that is where they were like, oh, if you have any questions, reflections, thoughts on today's class post-lecture, then you can post those on Piazza, which in turn, of course, would again encourage discussion about the course content. That would help in any case the entire class, but that would actually be a proxy for a participation grade.
Okay, that would be after the class.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. But a person with hearing disability could still miss out the discussions that did happen in class.
Right. I mean, that's a different story. In fact, a lot of the technical companies right now technology companies are doing some amazing work with basically not only transcribing meetings, but also summarizing them, making sure that they can extract actionable content. And so, I mean, we're really good with things like speaker recognition. We're really good with combining visual and audio signals to make sure that the machine learning models can actually capture a lot of the stuff really, really well. So technology actually is doing a really good job. It's just that, a lot of that becoming widely available and being used in classrooms, but I do see a lot of potential in that space as well.
Yeah, so that would probably be limited to meetings, not
it's the same thing, right? I mean, in fact, a friend has a startup that is basically doing the exact same thing for a classroom.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And again, it's also useful, again, coming to universal design, the way it really helps is because what you can do with this technology is basically send lecturers and professors a graph of how different students are doing in terms of participation. And let's say there is a student who just never participates, it'll actually alert you to say, hey, well, maybe you've got to encourage the student to ask more questions. So that also ensures that if you have a 500 class, technology can really help you focus in and understand how students are doing.
Yeah, actually, it becomes an assistive tool for the instructor. Actually.
Yes. So, yeah.
Yeah. So can I just ask you, Karthik? Are you allowed to record lectures at Stanford?
depends. It really is the discretion of the professor. So
Yeah.
it's really good for us in a way that a lot of our classes in any case are recorded for consumption outside of the university. So it becomes very easy for us that way to record those classes. So professors usually don't have issues. The issue that arises sometimes is in, for example, humanities classes or other classes that involve discussion, because then students might end up sharing stuff that they may not be comfortable going out of the classroom. And while the student can say that, yes, I'm not going to share it, I mean, of course, it's recorded and you really don't have any guarantees. So it's also important to, safeguard the interest of all the students in the class. And so in those cases, then they would be like, okay, well, if recording is not allowed, then we will substitute that with note taking. Or oftentimes both are permitted. It really depends on the class. It really depends on the student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is the first year I had this. I mean, so far we've been allowing students to record, but 2 or 3 faculty members this year said, no, I'm not comfortable. I'm not going to. Like you said, the system is leaky. Just because you're saying it hasn't happened in the past, how can I know it won't happen? And I don't like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, anyone?
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask Ms. Lakshmi that this regards to your scribes and tutors and note takers, are they paid people or where do you hire them from?
So we have a volunteer list, and most of our volunteers are staff members who work,
Okay.
and then there could be RAs in the system who come and go. There could be academic interns. So essentially a large pool of permanent and temporary people who come into the institute. And
Okay.
yes, we pay them.
Okay. Okay. And does the institute have a system to pay this, or does the support service raise money for this? How does it work?
So far, we have not. So we have only 40 students total, because
Right.
20 and 20. And out of
Right.
you have a very large number of students. And out of those, I think only about half a dozen would require that much assistance.
Right.
So the payment has so far just been through the budget of the ODS. But we do. I mean, if at some point it becomes a lot, then we will try to raise money from the alumni.
Okay. Okay. And digitization of material, you all do in-house, or I mean, how does this work? Are you all
So Khushbu might be able to answer that better, but we approach the publishers, and Khushbu will be able to tell you which publishers are allowing us digitized books already. And the others, she actually scans them and proofreads them. And I wanted to then ask you on that. That was one of my questions. Firstly, I mean, some people, there's this question of, is this even legal? Am I allowed to do that? So we've been kind of ignoring that. But how do you do that? How do you,
Yeah.
how do you
So
handle
in fact, when we started, this question was asked to us that is this legal, and this is in 2006. It was actually not legal. It was the system then was that you had to ask the publisher for permission, and only if they permitted, then would you would you get access to it, and if they also had the right to say no. So that is when actually Dr. Sam and us we studied the Copyright Act, and we said that this is rubbish. So luckily for us, that time it was up for amendment. So we studied international best practices, and and then of course with the Daisy Forum of India together and some 8-7 organizations at that time put together a representation. So now it is legal in India. So there is a 52 yes. So there is this amendment came through in 2012, which is the Copyrights Amendment Act 2012. And there is section 52ZB that says that for any person with print disability, which includes learning disability students, if you are converting material into accessible formats for their consumption, then it is completely legal.
Oh, thank you. Would you please share that with us?
So
Yes,
much.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I had a question about. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, so it will also be interesting from Khushbu to know that the publishers were sharing material with you, in which formats are they doing it, and which publishers are able to happily share, because then we could approach those publishers in case there are book requirements at our end. And I don't know whether IIM Bangalore is connected into Sugamya Pustakalaya, which is the online India library of accessible content for people with disabilities. So if you are getting material and converting it, then a lot of your material might be useful for others. So as practice, whatever material we create, we put it up on Sugamya Pustakalaya, so it's available for everyone.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Khushbu, yeah, go ahead, Khushbu.
Yeah, so there are only two publishers who are providing us the content in accessible format, and those are Pearson and McGraw-Hill. And
Right.
McGraw-Hill also their US counterparts, not the Indian counterparts.
Yeah.
So this year I approached them and they said they can do it for us, but we need to sign an agreement.
Right.
So I had shared the details with them. So I'm yet to hear from them.
Okay.
So okay, so
Two other
is there
publishers who Two other
yeah, open
publishers
to
who we could connect you to is Sage gives us material. So we've not been able to get through to Pearson and McGraw-Hill, but Sage and Oxford University, they tend to give us material. So if you have books from them, then they can be connected with.
It depends, but you can share the details with me. In case we have books from those publishers, we can
Yeah,
always get in touch with them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now the Marrakesh is actually, it looks like it has been ratified by the U.S. Senate as well. And I think it's pending ratification in the other house. So hopefully the U.S. signs it as
Yeah,
well.
no, they are, yeah, I don't know whether they're ever going to sign it.
Well, I have. Well, why do you say? Why do you? Anyways, let's take it offline. Uh,
Yeah.
all right. Any other final
So,
questions?
so even in the US, then Karthik, not all publishers do give accessible format.
So, well, how U.S. universities work is actually kind of something that Neha was talking about. That we really hope we envision in India, where a lot of them come together, and then a lot of them, most likely, people have these books. Someone sometime converted them. They do have agreements with a lot of publishers, and they do it through this whole sort of consortium of universities that they have. Which makes them much more powerful. This also includes a lot of the government universities or state universities, for example, the California State University system and stuff like that. They all come together, and then that is how they pool and they get books for each other, and then they also somehow convince publishers. I'm not exactly sure, of course, how many publishers they work with and which publishers and how it all works out. But
Yeah. And also the other challenge I wanted to ask is that how are you all able to tackle with math content, like especially at IIM, like finance and things like that? Are you all able to create accessible content for that, and what's the process that you use?
Yeah.
Because
So, hmm.
because
um,
publisher content for math in accessible format has been impossible to get. That's why.
so can you answer that question in terms of how you do that?
For finance, the thing is when we scan, as you know, the tables and all are lost.
mhm.
So I
Right.
have to do it manually.
Right.
And for maths, the students just says, give us the scanned version. I mean, convert it into Word and give it to us. The formulas and all, since we have tutors, will take care of that.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so it's that way.
Okay.
Karthik, I had a question to you.
Mhm.
Uh, there's something called Bookshare. Can you tell me something
Oh
about
yeah,
it? I mean, is it available in India?
it is available in
Yes.
India. Yeah,
Yeah.
you wanna go for it? Yeah.
Yeah, so in fact, Bookshare is now linked into Sugamya Pustakalaya as well. Bookshare is basically this online library for people with disabilities, originally located out of the US, but has been in India for some years. In fact, XRCBC was one of their Western India uh, local contact points. And now, because after this copyright amendment and DFI, there was a need to have a more national resource library, which is why the Sugamya Pustakalaya has been formed, knowing fully well that Bookshare existed. The two have been linked in together. So if you go to Sugamya Pustakalaya today, you will get all Bookshare India content on it plus more. So the right place to now access is Sugamya Pustakalaya.
The
We
the
can
challenge
post as well.
the
The
challenge
Bookshare.
with Bookshare. Sorry, go for it. Sorry.
Sorry. So it would be a good idea for us to send our books over there as well, right? Post our
Absolutely,
books. Yeah.
absolutely. I'll
Okay.
connect
Sorry.
you with that person in terms of how do you become a member. So your members, your students can also download books from Sugamya Pustakalaya. So in fact, one of the practice that you should always do is when you get a book request, search there because chances are that it might already exist. So you may not need to
This
convert it.
so this is by permission, so which means it would be only accessible for students with disabilities.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Karthik, sorry, I
Uh,
interrupted.
Something that Bookshare, though, is still not been able to do very well is still math and science books. They have a whole center called the Diagram Center that tries to make some progress. They are making some progress, but there's still a long way to go in terms of trying to make those books available on Bookshare. So yeah.
And Karthik, how does the scribe thing works at Stanford? I mean, you
Uh,
might have had quants when you pursued your studies. So how did you manage that?
Well, I have never used a scribe after I think the fourth grade or the fifth grade. So I am probably not. Well, I know the system, but I personally I can't share an anecdote with you. Well, so the way it works is scribes are identified by the. So we have this thing called the Office of Accessible Education, essentially the disability department. They identify the scribe in collaboration with the student. And coming back to that point that Professor Rajlakshmi raised about, what is fair, what is not fair, and someone then mentioned that, oh, we could look at the U.S. practices and maybe that will be fair. You'll be surprised to know how many issues Stanford come across when it comes to what is fair, what is not fair, what makes sense,
Oh,
what does not make sense. Happens all
okay.
the time. There are these judicial case beings. Having said that, they when I was in fact when I was a senior, they came up with like policies which kind of reaffirm the thing that it is important for a person who is blind or visually impaired to work with someone who understands the subject, because otherwise whatever people might say, it's going to be unfair to that student. There are other ways to check it. So Stanford is kind of a little unique in that we don't believe in proctoring. We don't believe in invigilation as such. So it becomes even more complicated for us because now you're giving the person who is the scribe who just can really help. But then we have this thing called the honor code, which then says that, okay, well, all students at Stanford just will behave in a way that is consistent with our university values. And so because there's so much trust, I think the idea is that we, in any case, because of the honor code, we trust each other. We know that people are not going to misuse it, and so we're okay with it.
Just to add to that, in fact, one of the biggest challenges has been like with fair practices at these entrance exams where they've demanded lower scribes.
Yeah.
And this was a constant problem that all of our students used to keep facing. So, in fact, again, as part of one of our advocacy initiatives, the XRCVC had put in a representation with the ministry. And in India, currently, Professor Murthy, there is a Ministry of Justice and Empowerment 2013 guidelines, with actually one of the IIMs, when they were conducting the CAT, I had approached them and they finally changed it on your website as well, that as per those guidelines, there is no compulsion on the qualification of the scribe anymore, and it is the requirement of the invigilator to make sure that the exam is fair. Because constantly, otherwise, what is happening is that lower grade writers don't know how to read the high grade content. So it
Absolutely.
becomes a mess. So there is these guidelines. I'll share a copy of those guidelines with you.
Please.
And therefore, even at Xavier's, we follow that there is no compulsion on the qualification of the scribe at all. It's preferred if the person is junior, but if your score requires it, or sometimes you can't locate a junior scribe, then we permit you to use any scribe that you want, and it is the responsibility of the invigilator to make sure that the exam is fair.
Yeah.
Of course, there is resistance from teachers, but we show the law to them, and then they have to follow it. I mean,
Well, actually, that would really help having the
yeah.
law because, yes, I mean, because otherwise it says it has to be at least 2 grades lower or something.
Yeah, no. So that is extremely. So the only tricky part here, I mean, to be very honest, is because in India, education is still a central and a state subject, and IIMs are autonomous.
Yes.
And since that is a guidelines, technically IITs and IIMs are allowed to frame their schools based on those guidelines, but you can still use it as far as you can.
Yeah.
I hope IITs are listening to this if at all possible. Anyways.
Yeah.
And I have a question on the different exams that you were talking about, Neha, that you allow students to take different kinds of exams.
Yeah.
So one of the faculty members, so some faculty members actually do that because that's one of our guidelines, which is to say that assessment should be as per as learning.
Correct.
So if a student is not able to see a graph, then please don't, you cannot. So far it's fine to that extent. However, let's say the student with learning disabilities, somebody told us, I talked to somebody who works in learning disabilities, and that person said sometimes students with the learning disabilities do better on exams which have options rather than,
Yes.
so you give four options and then that's easier for them.
Yes.
But I'm not sure if some of our faculty would agree to that. So what do we do about it? I mean, how do we go about doing that? So it is a different format of the exam rather than a different exam.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. So I think the way it worked for us is it's really, I mean, we've been in some ways just become lucky in terms of we've started with departments that were a little more open. So we just happen to have had students with faculty that were generally open to alternative modes of examination, right? Because alternative modes of examination, as you rightly said, is not only limited to students with disabilities. It could be anybody based on intellect or in terms of general methods. So once a couple of departments tried it, the others have been more open to the idea. But I think it might be difficult to start something like that with a faculty who has a very fixed mindset.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's also interesting how this and I think I've already spoken to Neha about this before. It's also very interesting how some of this works in the US, because I still remember I was taking an electrical engineering class, and there were a bunch of circuits and stuff like that. And I requested that, hey, can you provide like alternate questions in lieu of the diagrams, or do something else that would make my life a little easier? And it actually turned out that that wasn't possible, because that would fundamentally change the essential course requirements. So this is another thing here where how do you balance, for example, the standards? What is going to be left out? And we've had these discussions before. In some cases it makes complete sense. For example, if you have lab and you have a blind person, so what if you cannot operate the lab equipment? There's still a lot of value in conceptual understanding. I think it's also like a big issue around like just understanding that line, right? Like, where does it that you would fundamentally change the course?
Yeah, and this is where I would also, I think, what has been our learning is to try and keep the academic council and the academic body part of this discussion.
Right.
So where they don't feel that the disability services is trying to dilute their content, but just genuinely trying to intrigue them to say that, you want to offer your best cause. Can you give me suggestion of how you can alternate this?
Yeah.
And with that line, it has somehow usually worked so far. Some minor resistance everywhere will always be there.
Right.
But definitely, I think we found it difficult to work with a department that just said no alternative. Then we've had to say at least alternative formats,
Right. Right.
So then we would try and help the student as much as possible to try and work with that exam. That's really been the tough case, yeah.
So Karthik, were you allowed to not take that particular course then?
No, I took it. I was able to ask my. That is one exam where I actually took someone who would just draw the diagram for me based on verbal descriptions that I provided, and then this person also helped me understand the diagrams that were actually on the exam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how would you know what the diagram was otherwise? So during the study time, period, how did you? Were they provided to you on a tactile or something?
Yeah,
like
that's another interesting area, right? As a student, for example, when I went in from India, I had absolutely no experience with tactile diagrams, because they were really not a thing. Well, they were, but at least I didn't use it. They were not as common, and there was very little discussion around math and science. And quite honestly, when I was doing science, it was already kind of sort of challenging for me, and because there was like no one to ask anything and all that crap. So basically, I had very little experience with this. And when at Stanford, they gave me tactile diagrams. It did not work for me at all. And then I was like, hey, you've got to do something better. And then they introduced this new thing actually called verbal descriptionists, where they would have people who are graduate students in the subject come and describe those diagrams, kind of like the tutors that you have. And then they really helped me understand those diagrams. Well, I was kind of lucky because I was doing computer science, and a lot of this was actually actually just coding and really understanding it conceptually and algorithmic design and so on and so forth. Diagrams weren't as big of a part of the curriculum for me as, let's say, maybe mechanical engineering or civil engineering.
I think to add to that, Karthik did ask me to share this, couldn't get time earlier, but recently we did help IIT Kanpur design their chemistry lab and make it accessible for a student with blindness with little residual vision. And one of the things that did come up is the need for training the student in free skills, right? So a lot of technology and diagrams and equipment is available, but it's important that a student with disability may or may not know how to use those.
Right.
So then there has to be some pre-skill learning where they learn those special skills and then get into the lab, which we were able to offer the student, and the student has had a very good experience in the lab,
Yeah.
and so has had the faculty.
Yeah. But I think it's also important to make sure that you have very clear expectations as a disabilities resource center in terms of what would take a long time versus what might even practically not be possible.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
and it is also important that and this is very important for us, which is why we do those individual accommodation plans. That between two students with blindness, just because computer exams are available at Xavier's, not everyone takes them. So somebody might still prefer to use a writer, and that is what they are permitted. So between any two students with disability, they'll have varying sense of touch, hearing, whichever senses they use to operate.
So we permit up computer exams on request for a particular subject, etc. But is there technology that can do diagrams? Is there some
Yeah. So I would.
There are lots of technologies.
Okay. So yeah, I am a math student and I have to deal with diagrams a lot. So last semester I have done a course on differential geometry. So that was completely geometry. So there I had to use so many diagrams, and not only for that, like when I was doing, say, real analysis and complex analysis in my maths course, there were really complicated equation, and it's easier when you understand something diagrammatically. And initially, from last semester onwards, we started involving IIT Delhi, and we got a lot of help from them. But before, it worked for me like a lot of help from the professors, like where they used to sit with me and describe me orally, as well as draw hard on a sheet of paper with the pen so that it can come out on the other side. So they would draw a mirror image for me so that I could, feel on the other side of the paper. So what they used to do earlier, they used to just describe me orally how it would look, because I have developed this skill that my mental or visualization is quite good. So if they talk to me that in say R2, this is on this axis and it would go there, I can actually get a graph in my brain, and I was like, okay, this is how it would look. And even for R3 for that matter. So if you give a tactile diagram to someone in their hand and say, see, this is how it look, it may not work properly. But if you can describe the person before giving the tactile diagram on their hand, that this is what this diagram talks about, because I don't know about other fields, but in maths you have to deal with very, very complicated diagrams, especially in differential geometry and stuff. You have very one second. So you have very complicated lines over line, and then lines are crossing to the other line, and there are paraboloid, hyperboloid, and elliptic paraboloid, and sometimes it becomes very difficult to differentiate between a elliptic paraboloid and a normal paraboloid. So like if you can get the visual description as well as the tactile diagram, it actually helps a lot. And since these tactile diagrams can be kept for a longer period of time, so essentially it is.
There's also been a lot of technology again. I don't know.
I just wanted to share, like very quick technology wise. So there is, just as Shakul said that he does reverse images, now there's possible to draw on the same side.
I got your papers, Neha. Thanks for that.
Yeah, so that paper with rubber mat can raise on the same side, which is easily available everywhere. Okay, we can share that. So one is same side drawing is possible. There's also something called a mainstream product called Wiki sticks, which are just thread with wax on them. You can stick them anywhere and remove them and multiple use them. So a teacher can immediately stick something like that on a student's desk also, or a student can also draw some diagrams with it. Okay, so that's one option. There is a very nice product that I saw that IIT Madras has developed called Tactograph. That's an extremely simple solution, especially for economics line diagrams, where you can just keep a sighted printout, and it's an X and Y axis CNC kind of machine, which they inject Fevicol with, and the machine will just go over the diagram that you have drawn in paper. And it just costs like about 30,000 rupees. And it gives you very decent quality diagrams, especially for line diagrams and economics and things like that. Okay, so that's one option.
Oh, that's really nice because that's all we
Yeah.
need. Not much
Yeah,
more.
that's all that you, exactly, which is why I said that for you that will do a perfect job. And then of course the thermoforming option is what IIT Delhi does. And there's another very expensive option which is called PIF, which is picture in a flash, which is, but the paper is very expensive, that can do more complex diagrams.
Yeah.
But the tactograph would help you totally.
Something that's also again upcoming is the idea where you could actually have a lot of these. So this goes back to what Chakal was talking about, right? Where you might not understand the diagram just by feeling it. You want like more information about different components in the diagram. A lot of the companies have tried this before. U Plus Technologies, for example, have done this thing where basically they would have diagrams and you would like basically explore different parts, and then they would have like text read out to you, but that was prohibitively expensive. Some technology that is now coming up is how you could actually just leverage some of the assistive technology apps that people use and just upload any diagram and photo and basically have object detection algorithms work on top of that and try. And of course, it's going to take some time for especially for science and stuff like that. But the idea is simple, where you could actually do a lot of this on your smartphone as well, where you could feel around the screen and figure out, okay, what does this diagram look like, what are the different things, and like all of that can be customized in terms of also in terms of let's say like could essentially all be in the cloud, right? You have like one, for example, file, and you have like points defined at various coordinates, which essentially just helps person understand what kind of an experience is it. Not
App called?
well, it's still in development.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they
Yeah,
are working
but
on it.
there is a startup in India that's working on this for children books right now with the same technology, huh, Karthik?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so there is one group that's trying to do like basically on the smartphone help you navigate and see
Right,
images and things.
right. So that's one option. The other one is also, again, it really depends on the graph. Sometimes sonification has also worked for me, where you could basically just have an image and it can actually like sonify that and provide you an audio and help you explore what the essentially the overall flow or the layout of the graph would look like. Does not work well for more complicated diagrams, but works okay for just general diagrams, I guess.
Sorry,
And one
what
very
what
simple
was it? No, I missed it, Karthik. What was the
It's,
solution?
it's it's sonification technologies. Basically, they convert stuff into sound, where you could then use the sound to understand how the image is laid out.
Oh,
So if there's a sloping curve, then it basically just is an increase in the frequency. So there are software available. Two of these software: audio graphing calculator, math tracks, that are also available out there. If someone might want to use them.
audiograph. That's what it's called.
yeah, it's
Audio
called
graphing
audio
calculator
graphing calculator
Mm.
and math
Okay.
tracks. It's another
and math
software.
tracks.
Uh,
So that exists.
And one very simple thing that we used to do a long time ago for graphs is we used to just use reverse Velcro. So we would make a sheet with Velcro on one side and we will cut out thin strips of Velcro for drawing the x-axis, y-axis and the curves.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's low cost and extremely cheap, yeah.
Also, 3D printing. It could, I don't know to what extent. I mean, I know that, for example, the
Yeah, it just
diagrams.
turns out to be a little more expensive,
Right, right,
but of course it's available.
right.
And
And
then
of
of
course,
course
there are repos, there are repositories available online as well that have like a bunch of, 3D printed images that you can just
Oh, I see.
print.
Okay.
So, for example, Bookshare itself actually has, through the Diagram Center, a repository. There's also been a lot of work going on in terms of automated image descriptions. It's
yeah.
hard, it's very hard. And I think the hard problem is not to understand what is in the image. The hard problem is to make sure that how do you make it concise? How do you make it useful in a way that you can connect all the things that the computer or the computer has seen essentially. So that is something that a lot of the researchers are also focusing on right now. A really, really interesting area in machine learning right now.
Technology will just change everything. It would be amazing. It is amazing already. And
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there's a lot to take back, but I think like as a concrete idea, it would be interesting if both the institutes present here, I think Reena suggested it in terms of a cohort of universities. It would also help leverage not only best practices but also get material from publishers and things like that. So
yes,
if
we
you all
would be
are
happy to join. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
yeah.
Cool.
So
I think that would be a concrete thing we would take forward from here.
right.
Yeah.
So in October we at Ashoka our office is planning to have an awareness week, and we want to invite people, universities,
Actually,
and
one second. I never turned off the recording. I don't know if people are okay with sharing all of this online, so let me turn off the recording first.
oh, okay, all right.
No shit.